Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. As always, with me, Mr. Cullen McFader, and I'm Clark Coffee.
Wow. The adjectives were narrowed this time.
I didn't use any adjectives this time. I don't know. I think you threw me off with, so right before we started recording, we were singing a little song, an improvised rhyming song, which we're not going to do for you now, riffing off the title of the movie that we're going to be discussing. And Cullen just made me laugh with his final contribution to that song. And in all of that ridiculousness, I just forgot to think of a unique introduction for you today. And so for that, I apologize. And I hope that I can make it up to you during the recording of this episode somehow. Maybe I'll be able to sneak something in.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
in the meantime, we're here to discuss, I know it doesn't seem like it, but I promise we are. We are here to discuss my pick for film today. We're going to be chatting and talking about our experiences with 1955 film Pather Panchali, directed by directing debut of Satyajit Rai. We are super excited to discuss this film. I think this is certainly the first like Bengali language film that we've ever discussed. Like, absolutely it is. I don't even have to. I'm like, is it? Yes, it definitely is. But this is a film that I'm totally aware of as part of the Apu trilogy. I've heard about this film and, many, many times. And I personally had not gotten around to watching it until I picked it for this episode, which is why I picked it for this episode, because I had been wanting to see this film, and it just kind of like, it's been on my watch list of probably, I've got maybe some 500 some odd films on my watch list. And Cullen, this was the first time you'd seen this film as well, if I understand correctly. Okay, awesome. So, we often kind of start off with our personal experiences for the film. And so our personal experiences with the film are going to be, at least for me, my experience last night watching the film for the first time. But Cullen, before I start, why don't you kick it off?
Sure.
So you hadn't seen the film before, but you, like me, you'd heard of it clearly. I mean, you often hear about not just this film, but the Apu trilogy talked about as, frankly, one of the best films and an example of one of the best films ever made. And the trilogy as a whole is very highly regarded. So I know you'd heard about it, but I'm really curious to hear your experience having watched it for the first time right now.
Yeah, so I was definitely interested in seeing this when you chose it. Of course, as you said, I immediately recognized it and knew it, but similarly, I had just never gotten around to watching it, and I'm not sure why. Again, I think it's just one of those things that just slipped under your radar, and that's sort of similarly to as we talked about Sorcerer last week. So I knew vaguely what it was about, and I have seen films from different parts of India, plenty of films, but mostly modern, or at least mostly
mostly contemporary films.
Yeah,
me too.
And I'm usually a big fan. I tend to like them a lot, but I knew that this one was very different, and it was different both at the time that it was made and still to this day. It's quite different in that it's a pretty straight drama, and that there's not a lot of spectacle, and so a lot of across all the different film industries in India, there's often a lot of like musicality, and there's big
numbers,
numbers, and like often incorporate action, and so they're really, really fun and exciting movies to watch. And even when this movie was made, I think we'll get into this a little bit more in detail later, but one of the big hesitations on the part of studios and financiers of giving this movie money to be made was that there was none of that. And so people sort of hesitated, saying like, well, a movie about an impoverished family in an impoverished Bengali family is not going to sell well because it's got none of this spectacle that the
Right.
industry is known for. And
Yeah.
there's obviously similar reverberations all over the world. I mean, in Hollywood, there's similar circumstances
Yeah.
where it's like, where's the action scenes? Where's all this stuff? So
Sure. Sure.
totally
Where's
can
the
can
sizzle? Where's the yeah.
yeah, totally can relate to that. And there's like no big stars in this. So that immediately interested me in seeing a kind of really restrained, toned down
Well, and I mean, this
thing
is in
from
effect
Indian
an
cinema.
independent. This is a small independent film. I mean,
Yeah,
let's right.
exactly.
This is
Yeah,
we're talking about a minuscule budget. We're talking
yeah.
about non professional. These aren't by and large not professional actors. We're talking about a director's first film, a cinematographer's first film.
Hmm.
This is a film that was made on a shoestring budget over the course of 2 to 3 years because it was shooting on weekends. I mean, this is the same kind of thing that we did Clerks, for example, Kevin
Yeah,
Smith's
yeah.
Clerks, way back in an earlier episode, and I feel like this in some strange kind of way is like a kinship film to that one,
Hmm.
right?
But yeah, so
It's
I was immediately interested though.
yeah.
Like I was, and watching it, I think I really enjoyed it just because, and it's been described as meandering, and that's kind of what the novel is.
Mm,
Of course, these are based off of this film in particular is based off of a novel and kind of was adapted to this.
right.
And it's been described as, yeah, like very much like a slice of life, meandering, kind of, not super plot heavy, much more about the atmosphere and the feeling of these characters, and very, very, very much so character driven. Um, and that interested me immediately, and just kind of getting this feel for, like, there's no, I think one thing that's really charming about this movie is that, like, the most exciting climax of this film is the kids running to see the train, which is like a beautiful
Mm,
scene.
mm-hmm.
And they're literally just running through a field to catch sight of a train that they hear all the time. And that is just one of those things that I think it's a movie that, as you're watching it, and certainly as I was watching it for the first time last night, you just get this feeling that the energy in the film, in the context of the film, is such a mirror of how it was made and how they must have felt making it on quite literally no budget, with such a new, fresh crew and cast and all that.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I thought it was really intriguing, really heartwarming, quite charming in a lot of ways, and totally enjoyed my time watching it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I went into this with very little expectation, or specific expectation. I mean, I was aware of the film and the trilogy, and I knew, of course, that it was so highly regarded. So I mean, I guess I had some kind of expectation there. But I really didn't know a lot about it outside of that. I had, and I try to do that. For films that I haven't seen, especially films I haven't seen that are on my watch list that I specifically want to watch them, I try to stay away from reading a lot about them or, watching interviews with the filmmakers or these kind of things if I can help it. I mean, I'm already kind of, I feel like in some regards, I'm already almost like hamstrung in a certain sense as an audience because my brain wants to kick in like right away with focusing on certain aspects of the cinematography or the writing or the performances or or the context of the film or whatever and its production and these kind of things, and I'm like, no, 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 I just want to watch the film the first time, I because you only get one first time to watch it, right? And I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
want that first time to be as just pure a situation where, hey, I'm just allowing this film to kind of like, you know, take me in and into the story and just kind of lose myself in it. So I try not to surround myself with a whole lot of that stuff before I watch the film, and in this case I had not for this film. So I didn't know anything. I didn't know its budget or any of these things we just talked about or what it was about or anything. So I kind of went into it really just having totally fresh eyes.
Hmm.
And I think there's a handful of thoughts that really come to mind when I watch the film. Some of it specific to this film, but some of it that just reminds me of the things that I love about cinema to begin with. But I mean, I think like you know, it's sometimes it's like surprising because we're surrounded by such spectacle in our films now. I mean, even very simple films, modern films, you know, larger budget films really have a surprisingly amount of spectacle, right? I mean, even just you know, even like rom-coms or whatever, you know, I mean, there's so much going on and they're so fast and there's just, you know, to watch a film distilled to I think just the bare fundamentals of cinema here
Hmm.
where is it kind of I think took me a minute to settle into it if I'm really honest, you know, okay, hey, like let's settle into this. Kind of have to like refocus a little because I think you just get overwhelmed with everything that's going on in modern film and that's not happening here. You really have to but what's interesting is that you almost have to pay more attention because
Hmm.
the storytelling really is in the nuance of everything that's happening here.
It's super subtle, yeah.
Super super subtle, but it's you know it's a small and I don't want to say small, it's an intimate story and it's an
Hmm.
intimate film, and I feel like you 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 feel like you're right there with these characters extremely quickly. I think it's almost shot like a documentary. I mean, it hardly even feels like a piece of fiction to me. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
it feels like you're right there, and it's one of the things that just it reminds me of the power of cinema, even stripped of so much of its of the of the extravagance of you know special effects and stunt work and you know a really a camera that is all over the place, you know, stripped of all of that, stripped down to its almost barest of bones. It's beautiful to see the power of cinema,
Yeah.
in
I mean,
even
it's
when it's
these
stripped of
like,
all of that. And so yeah, I'll finish up super quick,
yeah,
but
yeah.
just the so I feel like you know it's such an intimate story. You're right there with this family, and it's again it's such a wonder. The cinema has the power to transport you geographically, to transport you culturally, to transport you in time, you know, to a different time, to a different place, to a different culture. And it's just I mean it's I feel like it's like the closest thing we've got to you know hopping into a little box and getting zapped across time and space, you know, in like a
Hmm.
you know in a time machine or something. It just um I was you know a couple things that just stood out. I think I was surprised how moved I was by Durga's death in the film. I was totally
Hmm.
not expecting that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. You had mentioned the train scene. There's so many deceptively simple scenes here where the camera's not doing much, but it's the composition is extraordinary, beautifully framed. Um, but yeah, I would agree. I mean, the train coming in when they're in this, I don't know if it's wheat or you know, I'm just going to
Yeah,
call
it's
it
like
wheat
these
because I
type of,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah,
long
you know, I
grass of
don't know
sorts. Yeah.
this long grass, this with the feathery top, you know, like a cattail kind of thing or foxtail kind of wheat or something. It's some kind of wheat probably or something. But just you know, so there's I really was taken aback by the quality of the cinematography throughout. I mean, especially given the lack of experience and lack of budget that this film had.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it was a touching, intimate story, and the aunt passing too. Actually, was kind of like less surprising because I don't know if I've seen an older looking individual on in a film
Hmm.
before.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, and actually, I'm quite excited to see the remaining two films of the trilogy,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna expedite those on my watch list and bump those up to the top now, because it's my understanding that this it's kind of you know it really is a genuine continuation of this story across those three films,
Yeah.
as I understand it, where we follow Apu. So and thankfully, and I just want to shout out to Criterion Channel too. Before we get into it, you know, we don't they don't give us a dime, but I saw this on Criterion on their streaming channel. They also have this physical media, but you know, this film was almost you know like almost completely destroyed in a fire in the
Hmm.
90s in London where it was being stored, where the masters were being stored. And I think it, you know Criterion I think spearheaded the restoration of this. And it's just an extraordinary job they did. It's really, really amazing. This is, sometimes we talk a lot of trash about, the digital tools in filmmaking and how sometimes people get carried away, or at least we feel like, directors get carried away with the application of computer generated graphics and whatnot in films. But in this case, not that they're applying CGI and putting effort. Could you imagine? Could you imagine people like adding in features to this film, like characters after the fact, like, hey,
Greedo
just put
shoots
some.
first.
But the digital tools used to restore this film though is just absolutely amazing, and I feel like this is such an amazing example of the importance of film restoration, and how amazing the amalgam of celluloid and digital tools and physical media and streaming. I just think anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out because this film would have been lost to time. Oh,
Yeah.
it would have been
It was
lost
nearly,
to
very
fire.
nearly. Yeah.
And the restoration is just extraordinary. So this
Yeah.
is on available via Criterion, and really the quality of the film is extraordinary. I mean, and there are some where in there are some sections where it just shines, where you're just almost like, holy crap, this could have been shot like yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just really
Yeah.
extraordinary. Okay, so anyway, all right, woo.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too that I think one of the things that really sucked me into the movie was that it's much more of like a collection of these kind of situational vignettes,
Yes, yeah,
and it just kind
yeah.
of flows in this way that you're just getting these like slices of life from this village. And there's some really beautiful sequences too of like when
It's like a
there's a
tone
moment
poem.
when the
Yeah.
rain starts, and it's just probably a minute to 2 minutes straight of just plants being struck by raindrops and the
Well,
ponds
and
getting
those little
disturbed by
water
the rain.
bugs and
Yeah.
dragonflies, and okay, and for just a second, I just a second, I was like, I could almost hear Herzog's voice like, in the
Yes.
background.
Yeah, yeah. The jungle comes to life when the rain.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, there was just a moment. There was just a moment.
But no, I think that was one of the things that I found really. I mean, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me about this was that it's because of the fact that you have a first time filmmaker and a first time cinema, and I think that the DP for this movie, that it said that he'd never even used a film camera before, which is just remarkable.
Yeah,
Um, and so you have, I think, when you don't know the rules that you're supposed to follow when it comes to telling a story, and especially in mainstream cinema where there are so many arbitrary rules that I think
mm,
make things really, really dull very often. Even just down to like, okay, well, you got to have 3 acts and blah blah blah. Um,
yeah,
when you don't know those rules, or when you're just so, in a good way, naive to them, you
yeah,
end up exploring things in a way that completely breaks the conventions. And I think that that's what really attracted me to this movie. And in no way is it like difficult to follow, and it's not like it feels haphazard or anything like that. But it's if anything, quite the contrary. It's almost so deceptively simple that you
yeah.
think that you should be understanding more, or that you should be
That's a
like
good
that,
point.
like you
Yeah,
feel like you're almost missing something because you're like, that's what I felt, at least. And I think that a thing about this movie, especially watching it today, is that so much media, just generally, whether it's film or television or social media, YouTube, or anything that's on like Instagram or TikTok or whatever, is
mm,
so incredibly, and you sort of alluded to this, but it's so incredibly fast paced, and it's so designed to get your attention in 10 seconds and to not hold it for more than a minute, and that's how long it
mm,
lasts.
mm.
And as much as you try to avoid that, as much as I try to avoid that, especially, like, I try to, because it's almost impossible to, when everything that is blasted in your face is like that, it's almost impossible to not receive some sort of like psychological damage from it. And I've noticed over the past few years
Yeah,
that my attention span has gone down, that like I find it
yeah.
a lot more difficult to, if I'm watching something like this, I can be enjoying it and I can be loving it, but if I don't have my phone
Put your
away
phone down.
and
Put it
turned
down.
off, then if my phone's sitting in front of me, there's just this urge to just have as much stimulus in your face as possible at all
Yeah.
times. And,
Yeah.
again, you can try to I can't imagine what it would be like if I wasn't trying to avoid it. I would probably not be doing this podcast. I'd probably be making TikToks. But I think that that's the thing, is that it really is like, it's almost like a palate cleanser for your brain, or like doing
Ah.
some sort of like fast or diet for this. I've heard of the term, like a dopamine cleanse is this term that gets thrown around these days, where it's like if you go and you just kind of avoid any fast-paced media and social media for like a month, you come out feeling better. And
Interesting.
I'm sure that that's probably the case, because I've had situations where I've been without any sort of cell service or internet or power, for that matter, for
Mm.
extended period of times, and you do come out kind of feeling a little bit refreshed. But
Yeah.
I think to tie it into the film that we're talking about, I think that, yeah, there is something so pure in a way, and just like purely cinematic about experiencing just these lives of these characters in a very, very well crafted and beautiful, in terms of its composition and its cinematography, but also in terms of its just general storytelling.
And
But also,
music. Yeah.
so yeah, and the music is great, yeah, but also so simple, so
Mm-hmm.
down to earth. And I like you, I'm super curious to see the next two movies of the trilogy. I have no idea, what the budget situations for those were, if it changed, if they were more, who knows. So I'm really, really curious to
I
watch
mean,
them.
even that is just an interesting, just to kind of add a little bit to your discussion about how media has changed and how I mean, and even in '55 when this film was released, if you look to see whether it's Bollywood films or Hollywood films, they're already pretty hyper. Right. And now,
Hmm.
not by today's standard, but you've got huge musicals, you've got, a lot of stuff going on screen. And but I mean, yeah, fast forward to today, and there's just it's media is just such a whole different beast.
Hmm.
And um and it's I'm trying to, when I kind of said, I had to kind of settle into the film, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to say, is that in this, okay, wait, I've got to kind of reset the barometer, right? I've got to, okay, hold on, this isn't watching YouTube videos, this isn't, and I feel like when you watch a film like this, it reminds you of how much we lose when we have so much, just, so much going on,
Hmm. Hmm.
and and it's inspiring to see how the simple fundamentals of the medium can be so effective. And yeah, it's like it's both inspiring, and it's also sometimes it's a little saddening, because I wonder to what extent you could get anyone's attention if you were to create a film that was as intimate as this film. And maybe this is just the way it is, right? Mediums change, mediums evolve, and the times keep a rolling.
Hmm.
um and so maybe that's just the way it is, and so to be sad about that, or to want to kind of roll that back, is just antithetical to just the way the universe is. But I do have to say, there's like a certain feeling of loss almost when I watch a film like this. And yeah,
Well, you know what I
I
think
don't
is
know.
exceedingly rare today too, is a movie that gives you time to think. And I think that that is can be also what's, you know, such a weird feeling watching something like this, or even to some people I'm sure it's
Mm,
off-putting, which is that you have so much time to breathe and to actually register what it is that you're seeing and
mm,
what these characters are doing and what they're feeling. And I think that that is one of the reasons why the death of Durga is so impactful here, because
yeah,
that moment when the father comes home and finds out
yeah.
is done so carefully and so slowly, and you have these extended wide shots of him entering the compound that they live in, this little like walled in kind of collection of buildings and huts and things like that, that is their home, their little almost farmhouse.
Their ancestral
Um,
home, yes.
yeah, their ancestral home, yeah, and it lets you sit with that for so long that you're almost having a conversation with yourself about like what just happened and how do I
Mm,
feel about this and stuff like that. Whereas that's so uncommon today to, and it certainly is, it does exist. I mean, there are certainly films that come out today
yeah.
that are I would say are as beautiful and as intimate, but they are. I don't think. I think you made a good point in that. Like, how far could you get with that at this day and age? Like, would a movie like this being made today go on to be, you know, said as to
Well,
one of the
and
best
it
movies ever? And
and
so,
it probably wouldn't, and that's where it's, I think, the medium evolves, the art
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
evolves, but it again, it's just, I think, seeing something, just being reminded of how powerful a film can be, even without all the ornamentation, or the all of the trinkets and bells and whistles and all these kinds of things. But again, but there's a place for all of it. I mean, I don't mean to disparage, other films. I mean, I enjoy all kinds of films, but it was just, I think, nice to see this. And I think, you just mentioned the contrast between this and just the media world that we live in.
mm-hmm,
And there definitely is a large contrast. But I think, I mean, it almost transports you. I mean, I think that's, if you look at the life that this is examining back then. I mean, this film puts you in the pace of the life of the characters that it's following, right?
mm-hmm, yeah,
And because there's such a contrast between the speed of our lives today and all of the busy, busy, busy that we've got, and the speed of a life back then where you would have time to watch water, the rain fall on the leaves and the dragonflies over the lake. And, I mean, it was just a totally different kind of pace of life. And the
mm-hmm,
film does an extraordinary job. I mean, I don't know, by necessity, on purpose, on accident, some combination of all, but the film and its own pacing does a great job of putting you right there, in the life of those characters in that sense. So, a couple of things you'd mentioned that I want to talk about a little more. You know, it's and it's interesting to kind of imagine the context or the inspirations of a filmmaker. This is a first time film from somebody who's going to go on to make a lot of films and
mm-hmm,
to be really considered, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And it's interesting to kind of see. I mean, it sounds to me like Rye was influenced by both Eastern and Western film. I mean, there's a couple interesting things. Renoir, he actually met Renoir when Renoir was shooting in India,
yeah,
and
shooting the river,
that was
yeah,
a, shooting the river, and that was an inspiration. I could imagine that would be an inspiration. Inspired by Italian neorealism. um, Bicycle Thieves, I think, was a film that was very inspirational to Rai at this time. You had said you were talking to me about Kurosawa even being an
mm-hmm,
inspiration,
yeah.
and
So you said
Rashomon.
that Rashomon being kind of acclaimed in the West and getting so much
Yeah,
attention inspired him, not necessarily in its like content, but
content, but
in its
possible
ability to
successor.
kind of break out of just the Japanese cinema market and have success elsewhere. He was inspired by the fact that he could make something like this, a drama that
Yeah,
could kind of yeah break through those walls. And I think that the thing too is that it's such a I mean, I think the reason that this is found such success is because it's such a profoundly human story. I mean, there's
sure.
obviously cultural differences that are very apparent immediately when you watch this, and yet I think just like anything that is fundamentally human, those cultural differences add to the level and the layers of connection because you can kind of take those and translate them into your own life and translate them yourself and realize
Mm,
that okay, yeah, even though these are the cultural differences are quite apparent, we all deal with these similar problems and these struggles and these dreams and desires and hopes and all that sort of thing
mm,
comes
mm-hmm.
through. um, and I think that that's one of the things that is so foundational about
Yeah,
why this movie
universal.
has such success. And it's super universal, and it's also but I think yeah, just the fact that you can sit down and see on the other side of the world half a century ago people had the same thoughts that I did, and
Yeah.
there's something about that makes it kind of really connectable. If that's a
Well,
word,
and
connectable.
connectable, sure, why not? I
Yeah.
think connectable can. I totally get what you're saying, and it's also inspirational. I think as filmmakers ourselves, it's inspirational on a lot of different levels. It's just logistically, it's inspirational in that here's an example. Yet again, another example. We've had quite a few, not quite a few, but a few films that I think would fall in this category that we've watched and reviewed, or not reviewed, but discussed here on the podcast. You know, just another example that you don't need a whole heck of a lot. You
Hmm.
don't necessarily need a lot of experience. You don't necessarily need a big crew or an experienced crew or an experienced or large cast. You don't need some crazy convoluted plot. You don't need all these things, any of
Hmm.
these things, to necessarily make a good film.
Well, I don't
And
even
it's
think he
just,
had a script.
yeah,
I'm
no,
pretty sure that
well, and no,
it was notes and storyboards.
well,
There was no screenplay.
so that's interesting too. It's interesting that you bring that up. I was surprised to see that. So of course I didn't do a lot of extracurricular work, looking this film up before I watched it, but afterwards I did a little bit, and I was surprised. I think, and I don't know why, but I was surprised to see that you're right. He storyboarded a good part of this film. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I heard him say that Ray said that shooting ratio is about 4-1.
Hmm.
So basically, for every 4 frames of film he shot, one is in the movie. Basically, is what that means.
Hmm. Yeah.
Which is a pretty darn low ratio. So
Yeah.
that means that, which of course makes sense. You understand that it's a small budget, but when you're talking about first time crew, first time cast, that's an extraordinarily low ratio to get to. Um, and so I don't know why, but I was just kind of surprised. And I think it's because it has by and large, it has such an organic kind of documentary film to it, a documentary, kind of feel to it.
Hmm.
I just, I just, I was kind of surprised when I found out that it was storyboarded. And I guess it's because I tend to associate that with a more rigid film, when this
Hmm.
feels
Yeah.
so the opposite of that, so fluid, to me
Well, you
at
can
least.
see some of his storyboards. I believe they were released in a book, but I found some of them online, and they're like these beautiful not watercolors because they're black and white, but this like
Hmm.
water ink that he uses to draw, and they're really, really.
Oh,
I think that's where it comes out that they're much more abstract than a typical
ah,
storyboard would be, and so I think that may be why the film still retains this feeling of, um, you know,
some fluidity and
creative
looseness.
fluidity not improvisation, but
Yeah,
yeah, not like this rigid structured feeling. And I think
organic.
too
Yeah.
that the book that the film is based off of, there's two versions. There's like a complete version and an abridged version, and I
Hmm.
believe that they decided to make the basis of the film the abridged version, but even then made several more changes. So, for example, when the auntie dies in the film, she's alone in the field and they find her. Whereas
Right.
in the book, I believe it said that it was like that she's in a village surrounded by people or something like that. And apparently that's way earlier in the book as well. That it's like kind of more of
Yeah.
a like inciting incident for these kids growing up. Whereas this, it's more used as like a changing element, like at the end when you feel that the world is changing. And I think that really works. And he discusses that in quite a lot of detail about the necessary differences of adaptation, from medium to medium, which I think is often lost in a lot of these conversations too, when people talk about adaptations of books to movies, and they're kind of like, well, what's the most faithful? Because obviously the most faithful is going to be the best, which I find is a
Huh.
completely bogus way to look at it, because I think that
You
you can't
sure?
necessarily, I mean, it would be the equivalent of saying that this painting, when adapted into, like, if you were to adapt the feelings of a painting into a film, that you'd have to, whatever, maybe that's a bad metaphor,
Right.
but you know what I
But
mean.
we get it. And they're different
um
mediums,
yeah,
and they
different
both
mediums have
have
different
different
things that
strengths.
work,
Right.
and
Yeah.
exactly, and so the fact that you that
But I like this
Rye on
idea,
his
though.
first
Hold on, I
film.
like this
Yeah,
idea. I just want to pause for a second. I just pause. I like this idea, though, of like, let's. I mean, are there any films that are made from a painting or a sculpture? Like,
yeah. I
I mean, I
wonder.
think this could be pretty interesting.
I mean, there are
Instead of
certainly
like the
films that are
source
made
being the
off of the
book.
art of certain artists, like clearly heavily inspired by certain
Sure.
certain
But
film
not
or
just
yeah,
inspired by. I mean, like
yeah.
like literally extrapolate some
Hmm.
kind of like, and I don't know what it would be. I don't even want to say story, but literally like translate from a painting or a sculpture,
Hmm.
like and base a film from that.
Yeah.
It would be interesting. I feel like this would
The
be
Da
an
Vinci Code
interesting. Oh
with the Mona Lisa.
God, no. Oh no. That's going to be your next choice, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, Ron
The Da
Howard's
Vinci Code.
masterpiece. Yeah. But no, yeah, I do think I
Oh
think that
boy.
for a first time, like a debut filmmaker to make that decision, I think is really neat. And I think it kind of goes back again early to what I was saying earlier about the fact that when you don't know the rules and you're not familiar with the rules, you tend to be free of those constraints. Um, and so I think that's really something.
Well,
I
and
think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, I was just going to add, and not just because I think Rye was pretty. I mean, it sounds like to me, and again, it's like I'm not there. Obviously, this is kind of my just imaginings on it, but it does sound like he had exposure to cinema, to world cinema. That it wasn't like he just went into this totally blind.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think there was like a cinematic literacy that was pre-existing for sure going into this. I mean, that's the impression that I get, that there was actually a pretty remarkable amount of cinematic literacy, but 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 I think but I do see what you're saying, and I think that having a small crew, having and it's almost like the limitations, and this is like said obviously very frequently, but that oftentimes the limitations of a smaller budget can actually be strengths in some ways, right? If you lean
Hmm.
into them. And I think having, even though it was shot on weekends, having that time, having the 2.5 years or so of production time, sometimes that can lead to some interesting things that wouldn't ever happen if you had, okay, we're shooting this in 15 days, 20 days, 25 days, and boom, we're like cranking it out. There's time for like marinating during the
Hmm.
production process,
Yeah.
or it's almost like in the way that the constraints of a haiku can kind of lead to really interesting poetry. It's like the constraints of a small budget can lead to some really interesting creative decisions. I mean, they're kind of, because you have to make them,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
I mean,
so
you
yeah,
see that so
but
frequently too with like I think, as a very mainstream example and a movie that a series that we've talked about on this show is like you look at the constraints that George Lucas faced with
oh
doing
no,
Star Wars, right?
we're going back to Star Wars.
We're going back to Star Wars. We have to open it up for our general audiences, we got to. But I just what I mean by that is that you look at that, right? And I think it
Uh-huh.
does not parallel totally, but I mean you look at what happens when he basically has an unlimited budget with whatever he wants to be able to do and can do it versus when there's
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, yeah.
hyper
I see where you're
constraints on
going.
him.
Okay, great.
And
So
you
you're
see like
comparing like one of the prequels to the original Star Wars. That's what you're doing, and you're kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
saying
yeah.
that all this money and all this money did not make those films better. Yes, for sure.
Hmm. And so, but I think that you see that time and time again
Yeah.
through uh, different directors and things like that, where you just kind of get this idea. I think that challenges and adversity can often bring about great things. Not to sound like a philosopher, but um,
Well, I think it forces creative solutions, right?
yes, yeah,
And I think it also, there's certainly a tendency with larger budgets, larger crews, that things start right. I mean, that always comes with strings, and so you start to see films that all start to kind of, I mean, this is where you start to see formulaic cinema,
Hmm.
because if there's, if there's a lot of money behind it, well, that money came from somewhere, and the people who that money came from want to see a return on that money. And so this, I think that's one of the biggest forces, right? That's money may buy you a lot of things, but it also comes with a lot of strings.
Well, I had a very,
Uh,
very upfront example of that too recently when the large budget movie that I just was on the set of, which I think I've mentioned by name before, but since I'm going to be slightly critical of it here, I'll avoid mentioning it so I don't get sued or
okay,
something.
fair,
Um,
fair.
but what you noticed, and at least what I noticed seeing that with, where you basically have unlimited money, you have unlimited resources, you are able to do however you want. It doesn't matter if you go over schedule because they'll tack days on to the back end of the shoot, and it's fine. Um, that what you end up with is, and certainly great movies have been made under circumstances, and the director that was directing this has made certainly great movies. But I think that it's this double-edged sword where it's like I can do whatever I want. I can put the camera wherever I want. If I want the camera to be a foot to the left, carpenters will come in and remove this wall, and
Mm.
I can put it there, and then I can, and I can put it on a crane, and I can have the camera doing any orientation, any angle, moving in any direction at any time in three-dimensional space, and there's no constraint on that. But what ends up, in my opinion, sort of happening with that is that you kind of lose the grounded feeling of it, of like the choice and the, like you said, these constraints and these challenges that inspire creative decisions. You sort of lose a lot of that because of the fact that you are so untethered, and that you are now so free to do whatever you want, and so it becomes quite experimentation. Like there's a lot of experimentation going on there, um, but you kind of, again, you lose this sense of simplicity, and you lose this sense of grounded. Like here you can feel that there is a camera on a tripod with, three people behind it shooting these very, very beautiful moments.
Well,
Um,
in a sense, you can. Okay, I see where you're going. I see what you're saying. In a sense, but what I felt was not that. I felt like I was there. That's what
yes,
I
but
felt
that's
like
what I
when I
mean, is
watched
that
this
it's like you
movie.
you feel the human grounded
Right.
element
And
of
so that's
the
what, okay, I
filmmaking.
just
Yeah,
wanted to,
yeah. I don't mean
because
that
I,
it took me
but
out in terms of like a technical quality. I mean that, yeah, like
yeah,
you just feel
okay.
that there are people making these
Right.
decisions, making these choices. Um,
I see what you're, when I'm watching it though, I mean, I really very much feel like I'm there, right?
mhm.
I feel like these are, I mean, look, of course I always know it's a movie, but I mean, in the same way that I prefer real stunts to CGI, right? I mean, these are real people. This is a real place. Now, they did shoot, as I understand it, like you were saying that some of the night shots, like night interiors, were shot in a studio, which I think they did a fantastic job of
Mhm.
incorporating that into the location. I didn't even, I mean, it totally, either I was just like, following the story and wasn't paying attention, but I didn't even recognize that at
Yeah,
all.
I didn't know that until after I
Really
saw the movie
seamlessly
too.
integrated. Yeah, seamlessly integrated. But I think it's, there's, you said grounded, and I guess that, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because it feels like, maybe another way to say that would be that, you feel like you were there. But that's very much the feeling that I got with this film, is that I felt like I was right there with these characters. I was right in the middle of this story. And you know sometimes that can be abstracted, or even kind of diluted, if you've just got stuff flying all over the place, and you've got a digital camera that's, going through walls, and I don't know, just going bananas, right, with stuff that just could never happen in the real world, and you're just, sometimes I just feel like people are trying to be fancy just to be fancy. But sometimes
Mhm.
we just, it takes you away from the human story, man.
Well, I think that you also made a good point earlier about how it feels like a documentary in a lot of ways, and I think I want to relate to that too, and say that the feeling I get when I'm watching a documentary is that it's always very clear that you are being shown something, because
Yeah.
especially in documentary, it's much more, you're
Well,
breaking the
you're
fourth wall much more frequently, and there
you're
is
very
really no
aware of
fourth
the
wall.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so and yet I think what relates that to this and the feeling that I get watching this, and kind of what I mean when I say that I can feel that there are people making these decisions on the ground, and is that it does exactly what you've said, which is that it does make me feel like I'm there with them.
Yeah.
And like, just like in a documentary, that despite the fact that there might be a narrator explicitly making it clear that there is a filmmaker behind this, what I am watching right now, making choices of I am seeing, what I'm being shown, it
Like
almost
most of
is
Herzog's
within
work,
that.
for
Exactly. Yeah.
example.
It's almost within that, within knowing that, say Werner Herzog is showing me these images, that almost brings me in more. Like, that almost brings me into the context and um, the space that this is showing me even more, so that it's not necessarily that I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, this is being made by a group of people and I'm being shown, that I'm taken out of the movie because I'm just thinking about the technicals, but quite the contrary, that feeling like this is so I don't know, intertwined maybe is a word that you could use, intertwined with like the nature and the village and the people and the rain and the trees and all that stuff
I
that
think
you.
that I think that we're just like we're digging so through. We're using so many
Feelings.
words to discuss one one simple thing. No, I understand what you're saying. Oh, that reminds me. You had mentioned, so we're talking about Herzog. I want to take a little tangential trip for just a quick second. Are we allowed to talk about the letter that you're writing to Herzog?
Oh yeah, I've sent it already actually. So I sent it,
Okay,
I
did
think
Herzog get back to you
last.
by chance?
Well,
Has
it was sent. I don't think it's arrived yet. It was sent so recently.
Okay, so
I would
you
be
just
surprised if
sent
it's
it.
arrived.
You just
Yeah.
sent it. Okay. Okay. All right. I didn't know if it was like safe to bring that up or if that was like
No. Yeah. Of
secret,
course.
but okay. Well, keep us posted. And
Yeah.
and hopefully,
Well,
I
hey, a
know
lot of that
your
movie is very, I think, in line with what I like about this movie, in that it takes a lot of time to breathe, and it's
wait. A lot of
simple, and
what movie?
the movie that I
Give
made, that I sent. Yeah.
Okay, because
Yeah.
see, our listeners won't know what the content of your letter
Yes.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
unless you tell us. So
Well,
okay, do you
I
want
mean, I
to
can briefly go through. Yeah, maybe that'll be our little
share?
tangent
Okay,
here.
just
Yeah.
briefly share. We'll
Basically,
just take a
I
tangential trip.
decided as a creative exercise, I would write a letter to Werner Herzog and
Uh huh.
attach the screener to the letter of my second feature, which is Human Nature, which was heavily inspired by Herzog in a lot of ways. Um,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a documentary, but it's a lot more real life than my first feature. And so I thought, there's no downside to sending him a letter. And so
Sure.
we'll see when he gets it. The likelihood is I will never hear back, and it'll be,
But you
tossed
never
somewhere.
know. Now
But
wait,
hey, again,
did you do what I asked? And did you invite him onto the show?
yes. Well, I didn't explicitly invite him on the show, but I did mention that there was
What?
several.
You
Yeah.
didn't explicitly? Oh,
I had to limit my
Colin.
requests. I had to limit my requests. I didn't want to
Okay.
bombard him
Yeah,
with
that's
a
fair.
list of
It's I
tasks.
understand. I
But
understand. I
I did
understand.
mention our
Did you mention the
little show.
podcast?
Yeah, yeah,
You did?
yeah.
Did you say like, "Hey, you should check it out"?
I said that your work has inspired us thus far to create a
Aw.
podcast based off of your own words. So
Your own words. We've plagiarized your
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't tell anybody
Okay,
about
okay,
you.
okay.
We just pretend that we are you. But yeah,
No,
no,
we
I think
did.
that
We
is again
Okay, sorry.
perhaps related to what we're talking about in a
Well, this is
creative
what I was
sense,
thinking
because I
because
think, yeah.
in the when you described a bit about your most recent film, I felt like there was a certain kinship, although you hadn't seen this film yet that we're talking about here. But it seems like there could be a bit of a kinship, right, in the
Hmm.
direction that you were taking your own filmmaking with this film. Yeah, okay, all right. Well, you'll have to keep us posted. I'm really curious to see if because hey. I mean, I know people who have like hung out with Herzog at his house here in
Hmm.
LA. He's like open to things like that periodically. So hey, you never know. I mean, one of these days you may be listening to Herzog on this podcast.
Yes,
And then I feel
yeah.
like the
And
circle would be
then we
complete.
end.
Then we just end. We would just end on that note.
That's the grand finale.
I mean, so a couple things that I want to touch on, before we wrap up. We hadn't talked about the music, but the score for this was done by Ravi Shankar, who, of course, like rose to like not too long after this rose to worldwide recognition and fame. I mean, he was, the Beatles were going to hang out and record with him.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe one of, certainly one of the most famous musicians um, from India,
Hmm.
worldwide at least, right? I mean, it was pretty extraordinary, like culturally, how he transcended.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not quite sure if was this the first film that he had
I don't know.
scored. I'm
I'm
not
not sure.
actually,
But what I would say
but
to the audience and generally to everyone,
hmm
anyone listening, is that if you've never taken a look at Indian music notation and how it's written and
hmm
how different it is from like Western music notation, it's incredibly interesting, and I can see completely
wait,
why.
you mean like I remember when I was a kid and I learned FACE, face
Yeah,
is
face and
face for
every good
like
boy
the
deserves
gaps,
fudge.
and then
Yeah.
every good boy does fine.
Mm.
I
I
thought,
always had every good boy deserves fudge was what I learned.
oh my gosh, you're making stuff up now. You Canadians are
But no, you can
crazy.
totally
That's a
see why
Canadian
the
thing.
yes, the fudge, yes. You can totally see why the Beatles would have been mesmerized by this and completely would have changed their music. I mean, especially George Harrison, who I think spent like
Yep,
years living in India, or at
or at
least
least a
visited
certain period. Yeah, I don't
constantly.
know
Yeah.
how long, but yeah.
And
Um,
so, but yeah, this I loved the score was great to this, completely, you know, appropriate and totally again disappear. We talked about this I think a little bit in our Sorcerer review as well, where I sort of said that the music when like a great soundtrack often just like disappears into the image, and I felt that a lot here as well, where it was
merges. I
like
think it
yeah
merges. Like
merges
not
yeah
so much disappears, but I feel like it's a merging
yeah
that kind of takes place. Yeah.
yeah
And then I think we've kind of interwoven throughout everything we've talked about. We have talked about the cinematography, but I just want to say once more. I mean, this is shot almost entirely with natural light. If anything, bouncing light around. Of course, like you said, there were night shots were done. The night interiors were done in the studio, but it's just again, extremely impressive and inspirational to see what they did with so little. And
hmm
it's like I was telling you right before we started recording, it's like inspirational, but then on the other hand, it's like frustrating for me. Or I don't even know if frustrating is the right word. I feel like strangely, and this could just be like in my own kind of screwed up, messed up head. It's like I will be simultaneously inspired, but then like depressed because I'm
hmm
like, I have more tools like like from a camera perspective, right, and a lighting perspective. I have more tools at my ready fingertips than they would have dreamed to have had on this film. And what am I doing? So it's like on the one hand, I'm inspired. On the other hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like hand slap in face emoji. It's what I'm feeling over here.
yes yeah. We all feel it, we all feel it.
No, do you feel it too? Hey, everybody out there in the audience, fellow filmmakers, do you feel it too?
Reach out,
Am I? I'm not
reach out
alone.
to us.
I'm not alone. I'm not alone, am I?
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel so alone in
This is
this.
where I fade out and you've actually been talking to yourself for an hour.
Oh no, you're not my Tyler Durden, are you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You're the Canadian version who
Mm.
says every boy deserves fudge.
Yes, every good boy deserves fudge. That's what you're going to be
See,
writing, like in The Shining. You're going
this
to
is the
have every
key.
good
See,
boy.
this is the key. See, this was the crack. This is like the glitch in the Matrix when Neo sees the cat twice. When you
Hmm.
say every boy deserves fudge, that's a glitch. I know that this is. I have now. You've. I know it's all facade now.
Yeah, yeah. It's all broken down.
All right. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to touch on
No, I
before
think
we
the
say
one thing that
goodbye?
we didn't spend a lot of time on, but I do just want to reiterate was like how many of the actors were completely unprofessional
Right.
not like they were
Whoa.
bad.
I
I
don't
mean,
know if
like
I
in a
let's not go so far as to like. I feel like people. Let's be clear. You don't mean unprofessional. You mean
yeah,
that they
yeah,
were not
non-professional.
professional
Yeah,
actors.
yeah, yeah.
There is
That's
a
why I
difference.
paused for a second there to make sure people didn't think I
They
meant.
showed up late to set all the
Yeah,
time.
they're
Out
partying and
partying,
drinking.
out
Yeah,
partying before. Yeah, no, they were not professional actors. Now I
yeah.
think the aunt was actually did have some stage
She was a
experience. I
stage.
think
Yeah, yeah.
was an experienced actor, but yeah, by and large, not professional actors. Which it's interesting. I was going to say I've never tried this. I've never tried this on purpose. I've tried. I have found out after I'd been shooting for a little bit that I had not
Yes.
professional, but
Yeah.
that's a whole different story, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to say any more about that right here.
That's a different learning
Let's let
experience.
Yeah, that's a different learning experience. All right, well, we'll wrap up here. Um, Cullen, as always, dude, it was a blast
Hmm.
to discuss another movie, and I think so many of the movies that we've picked, or especially like so many of the movies I've picked, were movies that I'd seen before. There's been a couple that I picked that I hadn't, but I think it's so easy to at least for me to want to pick films that I grew up with,
Hmm.
films that were on HBO when I was 12, and I was staying up late and my parents thought I was asleep and I'm watching them. It's really easy for me to pick films like that, films that I was exposed to when I was young, and so they're kind of part of my own little personal life narrative. But it's so rewarding to push outside of those boundaries. And I'm glad you enjoyed the film, and I'm glad that we could have a discussion about it, because it's I am almost overwhelmed with how much awesome cinema there is in the world and how little time we have
Hmm.
to see it.
And we've only talked about
So,
80 of them. So
and then
there
we
you
get to
go.
talk about 80 of them out of the thousands and thousands and thousands. I know. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Okay, we can't leave on that sad of a note. Audience, thank you for hanging in there with us. Cullen, thank you for being my Tyler Durden.
Of course. Yeah. Every good boy deserves fudge.
Every good boy deserves fudge. And on that note, we'll catch you all on the flip side.
Yes. Bye bye.
Pather Panchali,
Okay.
eat a tamale while you're rolling on
Intro song
Molly.
with Buddy Holly.